Blog Talk Radio.
Archangels, ghosts, and Bigfoot, oh my. It's just another night for Supernatural Girls. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only, Supernatural Girls.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girls Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker, and unfortunately, PK is unavailable again this evening. As you know, she has been going through some health issues, and she did have surgery. I know everybody wants to know what's going on. She did have back surgery on Monday. They promised her, the doctors did, that she was going to come out of that surgery like a new woman and basically get up and walk away, and that is not what happened. So she is at home, still recuperating and still appreciating all your healing prayers. So I will keep you updated on how she's feeling. I'm hoping that we will have her back for next week's show with Michelle Clare, the medium from Arizona, and she is going to be doing live readings for all of you. So another early Christmas gift, and I'm hoping to be able to join us. But tonight, here we are, the night before Thanksgiving, and you're probably at home either baking pies or just relaxing, getting ready for your big turkey day. And got a great guest. This is a very talented man, talented and knowledgeable. He's an adventurer, and he's going to be talking to us about what in the world is going on in Antarctica. Now, as you may recall, we had John D'Souza, the former FBI agent, on several years back talking about Antarctica, but then everything seemed to close down. There wasn't any more information coming out. We had basically heard it all from John, and then I heard that our guest tonight has been to Antarctica and has information new and some of the historical stuff that we need to hear about right from him. His name is Brad Olsen, and he's amazing. He's an author of 10 books, including 3 in his Esoteric Series, the latest one being Beyond Esoteric. He's an award-winning author, a book publisher, an event producer, and he's done keynote presentations and interviews all over the world. He's been at Contact in the Desert, UFO Mega Conference, the 5D events, and so many other big radio shows, etc. He's been on television as well, including on Ancient Aliens, America Unearthed, Beyond Belief, Book of Secrets, The Truth is Out There, and Mysteries of the Outdoors. Now, he is also a founder and co-producer of the Weird Street Faire in the SOMA neighborhood of San Francisco. And he's a Chicago native, and his esoteric writings continue to reach a wide audience while he is breaking ground in alternative journalism, public speaking, illustration, and photography. So, Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey, Patricia. Thanks for having me on. It's good to be with the Supernatural Girl. Singular.
Yes, in the singular tonight, but that's okay. I know PK would love to be here, but she loves this topic as much as I do. But as I mentioned, there's very little information that we've been able to get over the last several years. So I'm thrilled to have you here tonight. And I'm also so interested to know that you've actually been there. You're not just talking out of your hat. You've been there. You've been exploring. So tell us, how did you get involved with this part of the world?
Sure. Well, I do travel quite a bit, and 3 years ago had the opportunity and the money and time to go down to South America first, where I was with my partner at the time, Emily Infinity, and she and I flew into Santiago, Chile, where I bought a Ford Expedition, and it was fully outfitted for overland travel. The previous owner just drove it down from Quebec, Canada. And in a roundabout way, he was having a hard time selling this vehicle because it had Quebec, Canada plates. And so we just threw caution to the wind and bought it with cash straight up. And the first border we got to about 2 weeks later was Peru, and we got over. So that was a big milestone. Great. Was suggesting that we could make it the whole way. And then so met up with Nassim Harriman and Brian Forrester in Peru and Bolivia, and I was one of the speakers on that trip with 150 people. It was a great trip, and still friends with a lot of the people on that trip. And then we struck off again solo through Bolivia and then all the way down Argentina, which is a very big country. It's the 8th largest in size in the world and very, very long, right along the spine of the Andes Mountains until we got to Ushuaia, Argentina, right around New Year's Eve, and inquired around about, originally it was going to be a cruise trip, but the cruise were all booked up till February. And so we got a tip from a travel agent, said, hey, why don't you go to the other pier where the yachts are? And we did, and met a captain who had a spot for two, and went to a New Year's Eve party with him on New Year's Eve. And that's when my line of questioning began, because there were other sea captains there and other people who were crewing ships about what's down in Antarctica. And I had all these big mysteries. Yeah. Well, what might be under the ice, and why are the elites going down there, and pyramids poking through, and et cetera, et cetera. And this is when I first started getting some feedback and some insight into what was down there. Then, of course, got on the sailboat trip in mid-January. It was a 26-day trip. We lived on the boat. And, boy, it was a rough passage across the Drake Passage to get there. Got violently seasick. Lost a bunch of weight. Even. I think I lost 25 pounds on that trip.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, it was a wow.
But I can't imagine being on a sailboat like that and having a big storm hit. That must have been difficult.
It was pretty frightening, and Emily Infinity thought we were goners, and she was in the bunk above me, and for several days we were in such rough seas, all you could do is just lay there. And we were holding hands with each other, and she's thinking, oh, we're done. I said, Emily, I've sailed with my dad before, and I know if the boat is not taking on water, we're just going to ride through it. And that's what happened, and we didn't take on any water. And we finally got to one of the outer islands. They call them Pan-Antarctic Islands. This one is called St. George Island, where a Polish base called Arctowski is located. And the boat we were on is actually from Gdansk, Poland. It's a Polish vessel with a Polish crew and mostly Polish guests who were on there. It was just Emily, myself, and one other American, and 11 Poles. So the 14 of us arrived at St. George Island and went ashore, and boy, did that feel good to feel terra firma, and they let us take a shower.
Yeah.
We shared meals with them. And everywhere we went, and we went to several other research stations, we came with fresh fruit and vegetables. And you can't imagine what a gift that is to give to a crew that hasn't really had it. They're kind of eating out of cans. So they would invite us in, and we had a great time with the Polish hosts of Arctowski. And then eventually went on and continued our trip, which was basically a new adventure every day, either sailing through a narrow fjord and seeing glaciers calving into the ocean to massive colonies of penguins. And you can just get on the dinghy and go ashore and kind of walk among them. And there's really no restrictions, so to speak, when you're there. And I should preface it by saying that a lot of people say, oh, you can't go to Antarctica. There's all these rules and restrictions. Well, parts of it are like that. But other parts where we were, I think it's the more touristy area, and there was nothing to stop us from just jumping on the dinghy and going ashore, Yeah,
because that's what we've heard. We've heard it's very restricted, and you'll be met with military, and so it's nice to know that there's still some areas you can get to and enjoy.
Yeah, and that's primarily where we were, which was the northern tip of the Palmer Peninsula. And we eventually got ashore and stepped foot on the Antarctica continent, and every day, like I said, was a different adventure, visiting another research station or just sailing into a volcanic crater called Deception Island. That was quite a thrill. There are old whaling stations from the 19th century that were destroyed by a later eruption, and just the desolateness and the remoteness, and just not seeing other people for days on end really drove home how isolated it is down there, and really how remote this part of the world is. You always think the world's so overpopulated, there's people on top of each other everywhere. Well, not down there. And just now, the new season has begun, and until then, there was only 1,000 people on the entire continent, and that's just like the skeleton crew and the year-round bases. So think about that. The fifth largest continent on the planet, there's only 1,000 people there on the whole continent.
Yeah, that's wild. Very wild, yeah. So you must have heard a lot of stories. We've heard a lot of stories in the past from John, like we heard the John Kerry story and things about giants and giants waking up, but not a lot of detail recently. So what did you find out when you were there and you spoke to these sea captains and other people?
Sure. Well, John DeSouza is a colleague of mine. I know him well, and I think he's a very honest broker of the truth and what he knows. Talking about Antarctica, it's kind of like talking about Mars. It's a place that we're all really fascinated with, but it's so far away that you kind of go on what you hear. And so I've heard quite a few things about giants and stasis and what might be going on with under ice bases there, and why John Kerry was really going down there, which, by the way, he was there. And I do a presentation called The Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica, and I show all the elite that went down in this time frame of 2015 and 2016. And it was just this big block of elites going down at this particular time, because when we were there, it was already passé. It had already come and gone. So it kind of makes you wonder, what was that particular period of time all about? And I have pieced together some information about the Ark of Gabriel. Have you ever heard about that one?
No. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, it's similar in concept to the Ark of the Covenant, which is this high-tech device that, well, in the Ark of the Covenant is recorded in the Bible that if you looked at it the wrong way or you mishandled it, you'd get shocked. It's a repository of great energy, and this is what the Ark of Gabriel was. So around 2015, you may recall in the in the news there was a stampede in Mecca where hundreds of people supposedly got stampeded to death. But just prior to that, just a few weeks earlier, there was another incident where a crane collapsed and a few dozen people were killed. Well, those are just cover stories for the uncovering of this Ark of Gabriel, which was in possession of great power, and it took the crane down and it killed the excavators, and then they tried to get it out again, and that's when the hundreds of people died. So Saudi Arabia, being the largest tourism pilgrimage location in the world, is Mecca, knew they had to get rid of this thing, and they didn't really know what to do or how to get rid of it. So they consulted leaders around the world, and of all people, Russia and Vladimir Putin said, we know how to get rid of it. We'll get rid of it for you. And it is in the historic record that a fleet of Russian ships went to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and that's when they loaded up this Ark of Gabriel and took it down to no other than the New Schwabenland area and deposited it in an old German bunker, as the narrative goes. So then the very following year, the Patriarch Kirill of the Eastern Orthodox Church not only stops to see the Pope Francis in Cuba on his way, which never happens. Those two are kind of like arch religious rivals, but this case they met, and then Patriarch Kirill, this elderly old man, and I'll tell you, travel in Antarctica is difficult. He goes down to Antarctica to bless a chapel, which is about the size of a walk-in closet. So he goes to all that trouble to bless an Orthodox chapel in Antarctica. That's the cover story. But the real story is he was going there to get this Ark of Gabriel locked and sealed up in an old German bunker, and to the best of my knowledge, that's where it exists to this day, way far out of range to create any kind of problems again. So that's why Patriarch Kirill was there. But interestingly, the same following years when all the other elites were going down there as well.
Let me back up a minute with you. How did they find the Ark of Gabriel? It sounds like something they found fairly recently.
Right, they did. So that would have been in the 2014, 2015 range, just excavating around. If you know what Mecca looks like, there's the Kaaba, which is a central big black box, which contains a black meteorite inside it. And occasionally some elite pilgrims can actually touch it. There's like an opening you can reach through and touch the actual black meteorite. And that's why Mecca is where it is. And that's why every single Muslim prays towards Mecca, because they have this black meteorite. So as they build up around Mecca, hotels and the actual mosque itself that surrounds it, I suppose they were just doing some excavating or had been scanning around there and saw something under there. And when they tried to excavate it, that's when the crane collapsed and people started to die. And so you can't have that in your number one tourist spot in the country.
You can't. But you're describing that it's now in a small bunker somewhere, so it can't be a very big, huge device. It's not something massive. It sounds like it's something that you can transport fairly easily, of course, if it doesn't kill you. But does anybody know what it looks like?
I would imagine similar to the Ark of the Covenant, and there are images related to the biblical description of it, where 4 people would carry it on 4 poles, almost like pallbearers who carry it. I know some of my colleagues on Ancient Aliens have said that it would fit into the sarcophagus in the king's chamber, and that was one of the receptacles of the Ark of the Covenant. So I would imagine the Ark of Gabriel would be similar, if not the same in proportions. So probably the size of a small casket.
God, it sounds like this should be like a movie. It's such an incredible story. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So this thing is locked away. Right.
In New Schwabenland, in the old German bases of the New Berlin base, or Base 211 as it was called on the maps of the Third Reich, who are down there pre-World War II claiming the area. So this is kind of an interesting tie around to my trip, is when I was in the yacht harbor for New Year's Eve, I was talking to a sea captain who had been down there many times, in fact had explored around the New Schwabenland area, and he says he was looking for these big darts that the Germans dropped, and they were land claims. So when they flew around this area, they were just dropping these 2 meter and a half darts with a swastika flag on it. And he wasn't, the sea captain didn't find one, but he said it's a very mysterious area. all the mountain ranges have German names, and this particular area where their base is near this location called the Schumacher Ponds, which never freeze. So there's geothermal activity all throughout Antarctica. In fact, it is the most volcanically active continent in the world, including a fault line that goes straight through the New Schwabenland area and then right up the mid-Atlantic ridge in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, which is a volcanic mountain range under the ocean. Well, it starts right there in Antarctica and the Schumacher Ponds. Yeah, so I know where the base is located. And if I were ever to go back, I'd go back with a film crew, and I would choose to go to this New Schwabenland area and try to find the old bases, the old German base. I don't know about the Ark of Gabriel. That might be a little problematic.
Yeah.
But finding traces of the German base I think would be really fascinating and historic.
It would be, yes. Well, there's just so much that has already happened there that we don't know about. But then there's a lot that's been talked about, these giants that are supposedly there in stasis. What did you find out about the giants?
Yeah,
I've heard there were big staircases made for giants and doorways made for giants. What did you find out about them?
And I do a talk about giants, one of my presentations at conferences, so I'm very fascinated with this whole subject. And in stasis means that they're not dead, but they're still alive, but in a very deep meditative state. You might have seen recently that in Tibet, some Chinese authorities thought they found a mummy in a cave, and it was actually a very old monk who was in a state of stasis. He was just so deep into this meditation, whether it was self-induced in his case or medically induced, kind of like a coma state, but you're still alive. And this is what supposedly these giants are. Now, let me preface it by saying that proof, and I don't know for sure, that there are these giants down there in stasis and that they're waking up now, and this is going to change the global landscape because they have an agenda and they may be Anunnaki is the backstory in that. But I can tell you this, that as the most volcanically active continent in the world, the polar plateau down in Antarctica, in East Antarctica, is 2 miles of ice, okay? So Antarctica is a desert continent. It is the highest elevation continent because of that 2-mile sheet of ice. So with the volcanic and geothermal activity warming up the bottom part of the continent, you have the propensity for very large under ice caverns. And those under ice caverns would be shielded from the storms on the surface and the very negative below temperatures, and they could actually be kind of comfortable, as we would prefer the weather to be up here in the climates we're at. So the propensity for these giants, or for even people, some of these secret bases to exist, is very high. In fact, I know of several of these under ice massive chambers, one of which over Lake Vostok, which is in the top 10 largest freshwater lakes in the world that nobody's ever heard about. And the Russians finally drilled down there. They have a base right above it. In 2012, they punctured through, and then 2016, they got a clean sample out of the lake and found a kind of bacteria that's never been known before. They think comes off a fish that is as yet discovered. So the propensity for life existing that has not been discovered yet, and these giant under ice domes, as well as a fresh water and heat source, do exist in Antarctica. And so I suppose that's what fuels a lot of these different conspiracies about what's going on down there, because you have the recipe or the making for what could be these hidden bases there.
Yeah, but let's go back to the giants again. Why would they be in a meditative state? what's the purpose of that? Why wouldn't they just leave or, have an active life there? Because they've been hidden away for so long.
Right. And it could be, again, technology induced. Maybe they're in some kind of cocoon or something that has kept them in a sleeping state without aging or deteriorating. Why now? I don't know. Maybe it's the age we live in, perhaps, or...
Yeah, because we also did hear, and I'm sure you know this story, that at one point there was like a red alert that went off, and the base was, the military base area was completely cleared. They got everybody out. They were scared to death of something. The rumor was that it was one of these beings was waking up or coming out of stasis, I should say. And so they got everybody out of there.
Which base was that? McMurdo?
There's the only thing I know about it is it was a military base. There were military, not just ours, but from other countries that were there. And specifically regarding these large beings in stasis. And they had quite a military presence in this area. And then this happened. So we've heard a lot of stories, weird stories, like the film crew also that went there, went to some part of Antarctica and never came back.
Yep.
And then there was footage that the production company, they did find footage, but they wouldn't return it to the production company. So we've heard that story also.
And other stories of missing scientists, and then they turn up 2 weeks later, but they don't want to talk about their experiences, and the giant hole in the ice near the South Pole. Now that one has some legs behind it because there is a big no-fly zone area near the South Pole. It's about 1 degree away. So South Pole being 90 degrees south, it's at 89 degrees. So several miles away, of course. But it's interesting that one of the elites that was down there about 8 years ago was Prince Harry. And he went down with some of his army buddies. He went to the South Pole, and then they just went cross-country skiing to the 89th degree. But there's supposed to be nothing down there on the polar plateau. It would just be flat ice and windstorms. So why would they spend a week cross-country skiing in nothingness unless they were going to see this giant hole in the ice, which is approximately where they were going on their trip?
Yeah.
So that's kind of tie into that one.
What do you think's there? Why do they not want people flying over? They don't want them to see something.
Well, the cover story is it's for the ice cube experiments going on at the South Pole. And one of my colleagues is Eric Hecker, and he was just at the 5D conference in Vegas a few weeks ago as a speaker, and so was I. And we compared notes, and I drove him to the airport, and we're really good friends. And so in his presentation, he's making a case that the ice cube experiment is really a giant HAARP array, as he says, on steroids. And it can be used to control weather and a whole number of other things. So the cover story is they don't want people flying over because they're doing weather tests, and just even a little exhaust from an airplane would mess up their instruments. But he thinks, and I would agree, that it's really a cover for the hole in the ice. Now, the hole in the ice, this is reported all the way back to Admiral Byrd in his diaries, and he was the first to fly over the South Pole and approximately 1 degree to the towards the Davis base. This is where Brian S., one of Linda Moulton Howe whistleblowers, located it precisely because he had to do an emergency evacuation, defied orders to go through the no-fly zone, flew through it, and saw the hole. And so did Admiral Byrd. And he said in his diary, it's so big, approximately about 40 or 50 miles across, so huge, way up on the polar plateau. So it could just be a big volcanic hole in the ice. But Admiral Byrd felt confident enough to fly into the hole circle around and come back out. But what he saw down there was megaflora, megafauna that shouldn't be existing in such a inhospitable climate. So, but maybe there is volcanic activity and supporting some kind of life down there.
Sounds like it.
But I
mean, according to Admiral
that's
Byrd, it's quite possible. Yeah, quite probable even.
Right. Oh, quite probable. And not only at the South Pole, but other locations do have big gaping holes in the polar plateau due to volcanic activity.
Now, what about UFOs? Have they been spotted coming in and out of that hole in the ice? Is that one of the things that they don't want people to see?
Well, so that's what's so interesting about the hole itself, is that it could be some kind of portal or entranceway. And so I was talking to Eric Hecker about the NSA, no such agency, the agency that has been largely tasked with following anything UFO related. In fact, they have a building at McMurdo, the largest American base, largest base of any country in Antarctica, an NSA building that's nobody knows what's going on in there. Nobody's allowed in and no signs or anything. And Eric Hecker was telling me, the NSA's all over the South Pole base. They're pretty much running the Ice Cube operation and other things related, also guarding the hole. And Brian S. said that when he flew over it just a few years ago, saw not only tracks leading from the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station, but like a rampway, a roadway dropping down into it where the tracks led. So they could take a snowcat in and out of there too. You can go in by road. Of course, it's totally withheld, and Eric Hecker never saw it. Didn't even hear of other people talking about it, but that's not to say he didn't think it existed. It's very top secret there. And other locations with UFOs, Brian S. told Linda Moulton Howe that over the Beardmore Glacier, he saw UFOs, silver discs, flying around. And incidentally, other whistleblowers that Linda Moulton Howe had, called Spartan 1 and Spartan 2, said that on the Beardmore Glacier was where there was a craft that they went into, a giant octagon-shaped basalt black craft is how they described it. And it was and it was activated with their mental abilities, so it could communicate telepathically with Spartan 1 and Spartan 2, according to them. So that the Beardmore Glacier seems to be the hot spot. And the Beardmore Glacier is incidentally a very historic location because that is up where Amundsen, on his journey to the South Pole, traveled up and across to beat the Scott Party by 35 days. So it's a historically well-known area, and at the very top of the Beardmore, not far away from where Spartan 1 and 2 said that the big basalt craft was, is Mount Buckley. And Mount Buckley has a lot of fossils, including ferns, and there are even dinosaur bone deposits, some dinosaurs that have only been found in Antarctica. No other location, proving that it had once been a hot, sweltering, tropical climate to be able to support ferns and dinosaurs. So one of the reasons the Scott Party, all 5 of them, died on their return trip, one of the reasons why is they're collecting all these fossils. So they had all these rocks they were carrying back on their sleds they're pulling, and they got hit by a storm and ran out of supplies. And Scott himself and the 4 other people in his party all perished on the ice, on the Ross ice shelf.
What a way to go.
Bodies remain to this day. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Sad story.
Jeez.
Just showing how harsh it is down there and can't.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, so much going on down there between the spacecraft flying in and out and around and about. Also, because the ice is melting in some areas, we've heard about crafts being exposed that weren't seen before, and large alien faces that weren't seen before. And again, the multi-military presence gives you pause, because it's like, well, what the heck are they doing down there if there isn't something supernatural happening that they're keeping an eye on? Yeah, I don't believe these stories either about they're doing this ice cube testing or whatever the heck it is. And it's guarded. It's not like they'd welcome you with open arms and say, hi, Brad Olsen, come on in, let's show you around. They won't. So what are they hiding?
Yeah. What are they hiding? And all those are very valid questions, as well as archaeological digs where they're supposedly finding the bodies of giants and megalithic structures. I've pinpointed 3 locations, pyramids poke through the ice, and one of them is near the ocean, close to the McMurdo base. And Eric Hecker was showing me some maps and photos that he had brought back, and just kind of giving me a one-on-one in his hotel room. And I was looking at this long scroll of like a 360-degree panoramic not far away from the McMurdo base. And one of the indications on the map just said pyramid, and there's a pyramid-shaped mountain. And so one of the pyramids is down there. Another one is in the Shackleton Range. That's the more popular one that probably most of your listeners have seen pictures of, that casts that perfect triangle shadow, and it's poking up through the ice. So I talked to a travel company down in Punta Arenas, Chile, after I got back, and I even went to their other office in Salt Lake City, Utah, when I got back to the States, to talk to them about doing a customized trip. And in fact, you can go anywhere you want, according to them. You got a budget, you got enough money, we'll fly you anywhere. And one of the places they go,
that's exciting.
They'll leave from Punta Arenas, Chile on planes, and they'll fly to the Palmer Peninsula to a location called the Union Glacier. And from the Union Glacier, then they can take off on other trips. The most popular being is the Vincent Massif, which is the tallest mountain in Antarctica. It's like 14,500 feet. But there are a lot of people that climb all the highest mountains on all 7 continents, and so they got to go down to Antarctica and do Vincent Massif. And as they're flying there, they'll go right by the Shackleton Range and see this pyramid. So I showed him my pictures, including some other shots I had of craft under the ice, and he's kind of looking at them, not really poo-pooing them or saying no way, but just that he called the pyramid a nunatak, which just means an attractive mountain poking through the ice. And I said, well, if you don't think it was a pyramid built by something or someone, if it was just a rock, then did you ever go down and investigate or climb it or take a sample? He's like, no, we never did that. We just fly over it, and we call it a nunatak. So I think the jury's still out on those pyramids. But
it sounds that way.
Yeah, so that could be another possible excursion with a film crew.
Sounds like a good one for you, Brad. Yeah. And it sounds like it's a little bit better than the boat. So again, I'm drawn very much to any civilization that is still there and what they may be hiding around it, given that they want us to believe a certain kind of history and they don't want us to know the truth. So they've been feeding us this history about no giants here and all of that for a long time, as well as the fact that they feel that dinosaurs and people didn't exist at the same time, when we have artifacts in Mexico that say a whole different story. So John Kerry, he went down there. What was he doing there?
Yeah, and his timing was quite interesting, because period he was there was right during the 2016 elections. You'd think he'd have more pressing matters to deal with up in America, helping his party win the presidency, in which they lost to Donald Trump. Instead, the Secretary of State is down in Antarctica. And I have a friend who works at McMurdo, and he wasn't there at the time, but I've asked him about the John Kerry visit, and he said some of his colleagues remember it well. It was one of the biggest things, the highest-ranking political figure ever to visit Antarctica. And so he flew into McMurdo, and there's pictures of him getting off a plane there, these big cargo planes that fly in and land on the ice. And then he went missing for a couple days. He went on whatever appointed trip he went on. To the press, he said, "I'm a climate champion, and I'm down in Antarctica studying climate change." Really? Then how can you tell anybody where you went for a few days? So there is the propensity for these very large under ice geothermic domes that are heated and not so uncomfortable. You just have to know how to get into them. And so John Kerry went somewhere for several days and then came back and then flew back. And by then the election was already over. So the alternative view is, no, he wasn't really there doing climate change. I mean, climate's changing all around the world. Why do you have to go to Antarctica?
Yeah, I mean, you can't believe anything he says anyways. But what John DeSouza told us was that with Kerry, he went down there apparently to meet with, this is what John said, one of these entities, one of these large giants, or some type of alien being that was in charge. And what John told us was that this being really hated John, hated him, and said, "Don't ever come back here again." And that when he took off from New Zealand, there was an earthquake, which was a message to him that this alien or whomever it was meant business. So, anyways, that was what John DeSouza told us. It's quite interesting. And I don't know.
The fact that John Kerry was down there on Election Day and perhaps was delivering some not too appealing news that Donald Trump would be the next president of the U.S. and getting his marching orders, so to speak, and saying, well, this is the new reality. What do you want me to do about it? And probably, meeting some resistance that they never thought she'd lose, didn't make it in the presidency.
But again, what it just begs the question: what is this tie-in with these aliens? Because we can speculate that they wanted Hillary. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they just didn't want Kerry there, and thought he was an idiot. Maybe they didn't really care who was going to lead the United States, but they certainly didn't want Kerry to come back, is what John told us. That he was seen as such a disgusting person that he was banned and banished. Don't ever come back here again, kind of a litany. So I found that fascinating because he's no friend to the American people, that's for sure. And
right, globalist.
Yeah, he's just an opportunist. So it's just interesting, and I just keep asking. Okay, so there are these entities there. I have no doubt. Maybe more than one alien race is there. There's certainly these giants in stasis that have been talked about repeatedly. What are their plans? And what are they doing there? They've obviously been there for a long time, and they're keeping a low profile from humans, from us. But I don't know. What are they going to do going forward? And again, how long do these giants stay in stasis before they decide to come out? And then what are they going to do? It's just so interesting.
It really is. And again, if you wanted to find a place on the continental land side of this planet, and keep in mind that really Earth is an ocean planet. It's 71% covered with water. So the continental landmass is only 29% of the surface of this planet. So the land is actually kind of sparse. And so here's a continent with only 1,000 people living on the surface during the winter months. So if you wanted to hide away somewhere, I can't think of a better place than Antarctica, or perhaps the depths of the ocean, but that offers its challenges too. So if you are in a state of stasis, or perhaps in an old craft, and in my presentation, Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica, I'll show some of the best photos and images of where some of these craft may be, including, which I consider the best evidence of all, supposedly there are 3 massive motherships named by the NSA, the nickname Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, after the Columbus trips. Yeah. And I think one of those 3 exists in the New Schwabenland area, and it pokes up through the ice as the ice is melting. Seasonally, it can be seen on Google Earth. And in 2013, if you go back in the Wayback Machine, it's actually a German base called Konen, Konhen. And they excavate there on occasion. The last time they did was 2013, and you can see this machine under the ice, some kind of defunct machine. And some of the remote viewers from the Farsight Institute, Courtney Brown is the head of that.
Right.
Yeah, they remote viewed this particular location and said it was some kind of massive machine under the ice, didn't work anymore, but had been there for a very long time. So it could be that the giants are in another one of these in another location. Maybe this one in New Schwabenland. I don't know. But it's interesting that with giants, you have quite a few that have been found around the world, including these elongated skull giants, which have a cranium 30% larger than humans. And down in South America, I saw some of them. We're in the Sacred Valley outside of Cusco, and there was a little museum there with an elongated mummy on display right there to see. And I even met the guy who found it. Yeah, there it is. And down in Paracas, Peru, there's a whole museum with 12 skulls, these massive elongated skulls of presumably from giants, bigger head, bigger body, right? So who are these giants? Well, I would propose to say that they're probably Anunnaki, that they're human-like, but they're not human. And there's so many things just about the skulls alone that you could say, they're not human. They don't have the central suture, that crack that goes up through between our forehead and then up to the top of our skull. These elongateds don't have that suture. Their eye sockets are 30% bigger than ours, and the base of where the spinal cord reaches the skull is totally different than humans are. So even though they had hair, even red hair is sometimes preserved on one of the skulls in Paracas, probably looked very human-like, but of course they were different. So this might be what those giants are, that there might be some remnants down there kept alive in stasis, either through the power of meditation, like this old Tibetan that was just found, still alive, but able to do it with his own mental abilities, or perhaps assisted with technology, sort of like in the movies, the way they show people going on long space trips and going into a hibernation pod and then waking up many years or decades later. Could be something like that. But the fact that there's giants being found dead and alive down there and perhaps confronting John Kerry over the election just adds a little fodder to the fire.
Yeah, in terms of who are they and what are they going, what are their plans? But you mentioned giants everywhere. There is a story of a giant here in Massachusetts, and he was like a cannibal. He would eat people. He was huge, and he had like shark type of teeth, like several rows of teeth. But they did find a body that supported the stories. that in fact, and he had red hair. That's what made me think of it, is when you mentioned the red hair that they found on some of them. But yeah, you're right. These giants were not just in Antarctica, just not just in one place. There were a lot of different places that their skeletons have turned up. So,
yeah. Speaking of
more
red hair
mystery.
Giants, more mystery right out here on the west side of North America. I was doing one of my books is called Sacred Places North America. I also feature the giants in my Esoteric Series, including my new book, Beyond Esoteric, Escaping Prison Planet, where I have images of the massive size of these skulls. But out here in Nevada, there is a place called Lovelock, Nevada. It's right along Interstate I-80. And there's the Lovelock Cave. And you can almost see it from the highway. It's only about 15, 20 miles away. And I've driven out there and checked it out. And there they found giants in Lovelock Cave with red hair. Once again, this common hair theme. And this was a big sensation about 100 years ago when they discovered not only dozens of mummified giants in the Lovelock Cave, but size 18 sandals and duck decoy and so many things that they made out of reed, which grew in a lake, which expand the whole northern part of Nevada. It was called Lake Lahoshan. And it was during the last ice age that Lake Lahoshan was about 100 feet up. And if you drive across northern Nevada, you can see all the striations in the mountainsides where the different lake levels had risen and fallen. And one common denominator is there are several caves which would have been on the banks of Lake Lahoshan where they have found giants. There's another one called Spirit Cave, and I'm in my catalog of to-go places to check that one out, because there, again, giants were found, and then a couple other locations, too, that are less known and harder to find. But this Lovelock Cave, there's a museum in Winnemucca, Nevada, and I've been in there before, and a couple of the artifacts. It's so distinct, these artifacts that were found in the cave. They match no other Native American, which include the Paiute Indians, who have an oral history similar to your story in Massachusetts of fighting these cannibalistic giants and finally trapping them in the Lovelock Cave and collapsing the cave and then lighting fires and suffocating them. And that's how they finally killed them. Yeah, Sarah Winnemucca was from the Paiute family, and she wrote a book called My Life with the Paiutes in 1850 and describes the oral history that was passed down of the Paiute Indian struggle with the giants and then finally killing them because they were picking off Paiutes and eating them. So that's another reason why they're not human, because we know that you can't eat your own kind. Cannibalistic practices eventually end up in major health problems. But if they're slightly different, you can. You can. So
yeah, we're on the food chain for them. Yeah, absolutely. And we also know that traditional history and lots of these large museums are covering things up. And I have a friend whose grandfather invented the Bell helicopter, and he was very much into lots of paranormal things, real genius. And he got his hands on a lot of the artifacts from Acambaro, Mexico, where they had dinosaurs and people together in these figurines. And he had a lot of them, and he wanted to donate them to a major museum, and the museum refused to take them because they said it didn't go along with their timeline of how things happened. I mean, how ridiculous is that? So he couldn't donate them. They just refused to. But here these artifacts, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're very different from anything else that I've ever seen come out of Mexico. Very detailed.
And they're like Stegosaurus, dinosaurs, and how could they know what these dinosaurs look like? Well, in my new book, Beyond Esoteric, I have a chapter called Suppressed Human Origins, And in the photos in the end of the chapter, I have a photo of the Paluxy River in Glen Rose, Texas, where human and dinosaur footprints were found in the same layer of dried clay. And again, this doesn't fit with any evolutionary theory or historical model of humans living concurrently with dinosaurs. But like those artifacts in Mexico, like the footprints found in Texas, and also what Edgar Cayce said, that during the time of Atlantis, one of his readings, he was recounting how the Atlanteans were trying to solve the problem of all the dinosaurs that were living on the planet and were still vexing the Atlanteans and other humans in going about their lives. So they had to kill off all the remaining dinosaurs. And in my other book, Future Esoteric, I have a chapter on cryptozoology, all the creatures that aren't recognized through normal zoological studies. But there's this photo from Tombstone, Arizona, of these cowboys in the 1800s, and they're holding a pterodactyl, like just as you would recognize out of our dinosaur children's books, with the big elongated beak and the big long wings. And there's like 8 guys holding this thing up for a photo that was in the newspaper, and it was a big thing. So this gives some clues to the Thunderbirds of Native American legend and a lot of other stories of these mythological dinosaur-like creatures that pop up all the time.
There's so much that gets dismissed out of hand when it really is a part of our history. And the other thing that I find concerning when these objects especially just get, dismissed as fake or whatever, I'll tell you this. This gentleman who I mentioned before had ended up with these artifacts because the museum wouldn't take them.
Right.
And he had them in his office, and he ended up packing them away because they really creeped him out, which nothing really creeped this guy out because he was into the paranormal, right? These things creeped him out. Mm-hmm. So he ended up bringing them to a scientist in, I believe it was Osling in New York, and she took two of these figurines that were called creator gods, and they had fluted ears, and they did not look human. She put them in cages with mice. The next day, she came into the lab, and the mice had fluted ears.
Wow.
Just like statuary. So, there's so much to what these things are. They're so different, than anything else, any other figures that came out of Mexico. They obviously have some level of consciousness themselves. So, Very interesting, isn't it?
Well, and those are the clay figurines. They're like 3-dimensional, small little statuaries, correct?
Yes, they are, and they're all in the museum, I believe. A lot of them, but that's in Mexico, not here. But the gentleman that owns them, he passed them on to his relative, and so they are still packed away today. But that story really struck me. It's like, wow, here is something. It reminds me of what we started talking about, the Ark of Michael, and how many of these things are around, and yet we have no clue as to how they work, what they are. We're so clueless about these things.
Yeah, we really are. And when these artifacts come up, the authorities who just don't want to deal with them are so quick to just stash them away and deny their existence and really give them the light of day and the attention they really deserve. Because also out of Mexico, not only in one location, but in several very dense jungle, remote locations, in some of these caves, they found these carved stone alien faces and UFOs where sometimes a beam of light is coming out from the UFO, and either aliens are coming down in the beam or people are beaming up. Have you seen that collection?
I have not seen that collection.
John D'Souza knows about them, and there's a gentleman named Ray Hernandez who has some of them and comes to conferences, and I've seen them. I've held them in my hands, and they're just remarkable. Not only the craftsmanship that went into them, but the sheer quantity of them. There are literally hundreds of these. And I've seen a video at the last conference where Ray Hernandez spoke. He went to one of these caves on an expedition, and he filmed it the whole way, including when they got to the cave, and you could tell how sweaty and tired they all were. It was quite a hike to get there. And they're in the cave, and the film is still rolling, and they're flipping over rocks and kind of snooping around, and eventually they find some brand new stashes of these stones, and you could see that they're well deep in the mud and packed in there, and the weight of the stone on top of them is like, they're not faking this, come on. And then they pull it out and they wash it off, and here's another one of these really amazingly carved pieces, and I have some images of them in Beyond Esoteric to show people. And once again, nobody will have anything to do with it. In fact, the Mexican government had a collection of them since the 1930s. They didn't say anything about it. They didn't reveal them. Then all of a sudden, about 10 years ago, they just said, we're going to release them as is. You make what you will of them. We're not going to say what we think they are, but this is where they were located. We've just been sitting on them since the 1930s, and here you go.
My goodness.
Huge collection. Yeah.
I'm going to have to look those up so I can see them and look at the pictures in your book, because, this is all very, very interesting. There's so much hidden, and we really deserve to know a lot more about all of these events and all of these things going on. Now, you've been to a lot of UFO conferences recently, and you've been to Contact in the Desert. And what's new in the UFO field? What's going on these days?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I'm always very interested in the latest findings, too. I've had the great opportunity to be asked to moderate panels, most often with the super soldiers, or as they like to be known as enhanced soldiers, that several of which have been part of the 20 and Back program, the secret space program, including Tony Rodriguez, who just happened to be in the hotel room with me. We doubled up, and that was fine. I knew he was going to be there, and we became really good friends. He's very articulate, I think, among some of the most articulate of them, including James Rink, Penny Bradley, and Eric Hecker was on our panel. I'm going to moderate the Super Soldier panel at the UFO Mega Conference in March next year, and we're adding Michael Jaco is going to be on that panel as well. So I go into this, I'm a journalist, I'm a researcher. I'm just very curious in these subjects, like you. And I just ask really pertinent questions because I want to get to the bottom of it too. So I think what the super soldiers are bringing forth is really the cutting edge. Because if you think about it, if we're up there in space, this breakaway civilization, and when they come back, the common denominator is they all have their memory swiped. And through regressive hypnotherapy, Lori McDonald is a colleague of mine. She does it in Sacramento. Barbara Lamb, Dolores Cannon used to do it when she was still alive, to get these memories to come back. And what they've reported, like Randy Kramer, just incredible, what they've experienced in the last few decades off planet. So I think that's really the cutting edge.
Randy's been on the show a couple of times talking about his experiences and the colonies that do exist on Mars. And that, I find it fascinating. I don't doubt what he's saying. There's his whole experience, when he talks about it, is extremely detailed. And when you ask Randy a question, he answers it immediately without even giving it a second thought. So the audience really enjoyed hearing from Randy about being a super soldier and also some of the life forms that he encountered on Mars. So in terms of abductions, let's talk about that for a minute. It seemed like the abductions tapered off. There were a lot of them going on for a period of time, and then in the 80s, they seemed to just not stop, but there were a lot less after the 80s. So what's your experience with this? Are you hearing new abduction stories, or is it still kind of on the wing?
It's kind of on the wing, but I think it also ties into what a lot of these super soldiers who have been off planet are reporting, and that is there is a huge profit in human trafficking. As hard as this is to hear, one common denominator of a lot of these individuals who have done what they call the programs and 20 and back had their memory swiped, one thing they remember is that there are often people who are also being abducted and going off planet and never to return. So it could be that a lot of the abductive cases, I mean, we're still in America alone, this is on the FBI data list, 40,000 Americans go missing every year in this country. And then you think worldwide, it's in the hundreds of thousands of people go missing every year. Now, of course, some of those are runaways and some of those are human trafficked in brothels and whatnot else. But some of them, according to the super soldiers who have worked off planet, are being exported and shipped off and never to come back. So it could be that they just don't need to return them anymore to their bodies, as abductees would often say, or I don't know, maybe they're more
using them,
covert.
perhaps. Yeah, they could be using them for work or slavery or whatever. Yeah, which is very troubling. So, and 40,000 just in the U.S. alone is a huge number. So that's interesting that the super soldiers are saying that that's what they remember, is seeing people being taken off world and used for some purpose, unbeknownst to whatever.
And I should preface it by saying I read people, I'm empathic, and I when I'm face to face with someone, I think I can be a pretty good judge if they're telling a whopper or if they're really emotionally charged. And I'll tell you this, Patricia, they are sometimes close to tears. And these are sometimes big macho guys who are saying, we saw these people in cages. We knew they weren't coming back. They were crying out for help. There was nothing we can do. And when you see their face and you see the emotional charge that comes from relating that story, it's very believable. And I do believe that they're telling the truth. And it's very traumatic to have to recount that, knowing that what they're saying is, I saw it happening, but there was nothing I can do. And I felt like now maybe in retrospect, I wish there was something I could have done, maybe broken ranks and freed someone who was crying out for help, but they couldn't and they didn't. And that's why they feel that emotional charge. Yeah, that matches also what some abductees have shared. I mean, the Carl Higdon story, which is one of the best, in my opinion, because there was real proof that he had an off-world experience. But he also talked about in the ship there were these very bright lights. His vision was very blurry, but he saw other people there, humans, in the ship that weren't going to be returned. He was returned, but he knew these other people probably were not going to be returned. So that's very difficult, I think, very emotional for anybody who's been through that. And it's also a version of selling out the human race. You're seeing your own fellow humans who are going to have a pretty rough next few years of their lives. Sold into slavery, sold into prostitution. Apparently, the Earth women are still the hottest thing this side of the universe, and then there is actually ET, human women prostitution. This is what Tony Rodriguez says when he was on the small planet called Ceres, which is part of the asteroid belt. And he said there is a base inside of that small planetoid in which he was, during his time, he wasn't a super soldier, but he was recruited as a child with these missing years that he's finally gotten his memory back. But during his free time on Ceres, he could take a monorail through the town, and there was this red light district in a particular brothel where he was allowed as a youngster, not participating, but just to observe. And he got to know some of the Earth women who were prostitutes, and he would say that that they were really mind-bent when they would be with extraterrestrials, because they're so incredibly telepathic that they would give these women hope that they would be back to rescue them, and they never did come back.
Never did.
And yeah, so
How
not
sad.
only were they being used physically, but they would really get worked up telepathically and mentally. And basically he said that they eventually would just lose it, and they would just go absolutely crazy and couldn't handle it after a while. And then
I can understand that.
Life is over, and then they just have to get rid of the corpses, which out in outer space I don't think is that hard.
Yeah, isn't that a horrible story? And yet it makes sense, because so many people do go missing, never to be seen again, and so many abductees have talked about seeing other people. In fact, Betty Andreasen talked about it. She saw people from different periods in history in these glass cases. And Marianne Shenefield, whose case doesn't get talked about much, but it's one of the best ones ever. And she also was taken aboard a craft where they were very friendly to her and treated her differently. But when she looked around, she saw, the bodies of humans, and she asked about them. And they assured her that what she was looking at was someone who died on a battlefield, and they did not end this person's life. But so many have reported seeing this on ships, something like that.
Do you remember the case of the Aztec crash in the late 1940s? It was right after Roswell. And William Cooper, would talk about it in his lectures. And he said one of the main reasons why they had to hush up entire UFO enigma is because at the crash at Aztec, New Mexico, when they recovered the craft and looked inside, what they found was human parts. And they thought, the military brass thought that this would be so traumatic and so disturbing to the American people that they absolutely had to hush it up at all costs. And that's why still to this day, UFOs are top secret. And now we're getting this little dribble out of the Tic Tac video or this or that, but nothing of real substance, as you know, ever comes out of government disclosure.
No. Because there's no upside for them to come clean on any of this. There's no benefit to them, and as long as there's no benefit to them, they're not going to tell us what's really happening. And again, it would be, I think, totally embarrassing to them if another nation, another great power like Russia or even China came out and told the truth about UFOs. I think the United States would be humiliated even more than it is today over this whole topic. But I know also, according to some shamans that have been on the show from Peru, that their countries have been threatened by the U.S. If you talk about what you know about UFOs, then we'll withdraw all of your funding, all of it.
Yep.
So, they learned to shut their mouths and not talk about the craft that landed when 300 journalists witnessed it, all of these big events. So we don't usually hear about them unless we get somebody like a shaman on the show to talk about it.
Right.
So
is that what it takes? We got to get a shaman on to get the real truth here.
Yeah, to tell us what's really going on in South America. Yes. So it's very frustrating. And again, it goes back to even Eisenhower, right? Wasn't he supposed to be the one that made the first contract with UFO alien people and said, we're not going to tell the American people what's happening, and yes, you have the right to take certain number of our people as abductees, but of course it went way over whatever they discussed and agreed to, and of course what is the government going to do about it? Nothing but cover it up.
Exactly. And isn't it interesting that what we give in exchange for the high technology, and that's called the Greada Treaty, which is renewed every 10 years on the fourth year of the decade, that what we give to them is human trafficking, is bodies. That's what they want the most.
Disgusting.
It's
and that's,
disgusting.
I'm sure, what the government doesn't want us to know.
That's the core secret, what they consider the hardest pill to swallow, and why they have to keep the entire thing covered up.
It makes total sense. You know, it's logical to think that that's the reason why they keep it all undercover. It makes sense. And
I mean, look at even how
awful.
Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, who's now going on trial for human trafficking, look at how that got covered up. Look at how all the elites that went down there and politicians, how that was just always just shoved under the rug. Had he not been so blatant and so overt and such a sex addict to continue his ways till finally they had to bring him on trial, he'd probably still be doing it down there on Little St. James Island and the American Virgin Islands. One of our territories is where this guy was getting away with it for decades. So
absolutely.
It's a big
You're right.
problem.
It's huge.
It's a real big problem.
It's absolutely huge. But let me ask you this, Brad, because you've been researching for so many years and you've been around the world talking to so many people. Why do you think now they're dribbling out this stuff about sightings? Yes, we know that these things are flying around in our skies. Why are they dribbling this out now? What's motivating them? Because really they don't have to, but they did. Why?
So remember one of the biggest paperclip Nazis that came over right after World War II. In fact, I have a picture of him wearing his SS uniform in Peenemünde, Germany, is Werner von Braun. He was SS.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even though oftentimes he'd be seen in his civilian clothes with the officers, he was SS, and that was an occult secret society among the elite of the German brass in World War II. He came over here, and he headed up NASA, and he was mostly responsible for the Mercury and then the Apollo moon missions. So why is this being covered up? Well, it's partly the fault of the paperclip Nazis because they were still loyal and allied to what was then Third Reich, evaporated after the war. But the Third Reich, being the political party of Germany, you got to understand the fighting forces of Germany surrendered. So the Luftwaffe, which was their air force, and the Wehrmacht was the army, and the Navy, they all surrendered. But the Third Reich never surrendered. The Third Reich went underground and became the Fourth Reich. And that's what we're still dealing with today. So when you think about the NASA scientists, not only them, but the MK Ultra psychiatrists came over right over into our secret space program. That's why it's spelled MK. That's the German spelling for control. KONTROLLE. Mind Control Ultra. Mind Control Naomi is now coming to the surface. Naomi is the mass medicating, the mass vaccinating of people. And now we see that starting to happen. But these are programs that have been happening for decades. And only now, why is it only coming out now? Well, it's not really coming out now. It's sort of being forced out while they're kicking and screaming to hold on to their secrets. But so many of us know, and I know you have a very sophisticated listening audience that understands that we've known about UFOs and their existence for many years, many decades. We don't need the government to tell us, because disclosure is now coming out organically. Disclosure is coming from the bottom up, and we don't even need the government anymore to tell us. But I'll tell you, I think the reason why that they are starting to even come into mainstream media, I think they're prepping us for Project Bluebeam, for the fake alien invasion, which, according to Carol Rosen, who was the assistant to Wernher von Braun, he, on his deathbed, confession to Carol Rosen, would say this is their final play. This is the globalists' final chance for this new world order. Is that the one way they can get everybody freaked out and afraid, and when we're in a fear state, we don't think rationally. And look, holographic technology is very well advanced. Was it Tupac Shakur and Michael Jackson were going on tour as holograms? You'd see it and you'd think it's total real life. So they have the technology to do this fake alien invasion, and they're probably priming us a little bit at a time. So if there ever was, and they put it out there, we'd all believe it, but it'd be fake. And even Randy Kramer, he wrote about it in his book, and he's told me personally that they will do it and even use some of the technology that has been sequestered away, and we'll see some real flights and some fake holograms. But he said it's all going to be staged, including that Randy Kramer told me this, that they have an agreement with an insectoid race who would even hatch a bunch of clone aliens to get blown away, so little body parts would be falling all over, but they would be part of the whole fake alien invasion too, just to make it so very realistic. So why do I think that the government is offering up anything, and it's only that there is an agenda?
Probably just to support that.
Down.
Well, it makes sense what you're saying. And when Randy was on the show, he was talking about it. They said, so what are these aliens going to look like? And then he told us the insectoids, like 6-7 feet tall, that would freak everybody out. And so I said they couldn't use the Pleiadians, the good-looking ones, right? They had to use the insectoids. He's like, of course. So, but he also said the technology that they would use, if should they go ahead with a horrible event like that, the technology they already have would be used against us, and there would be multiple deaths. I mean, many people would be wiped out to prove their point in this. And that's, again, it's like this government, they're not helping us. Let's put it that way. It's a real shame, but
life is cheap on this planet. Life is cheap.
Apparently.
I mean, we were talking about human trafficking on the dark web when the whole Silk Road dark web was exposed a few years ago. Not only could you buy any kind of drugs or weapons you want on the dark web, but you could put a hit on someone for $1,000. You hate your neighbor, pay $1,000 on the dark web, and somebody will come by and kill the guy when he's shopping at Walmart. So life is cheap on this planet. They don't care about us so much. And so, look, false flags sometimes go live and real people do die, but they're still false flag events, and they think life is cheap. So, sure, if there's some, what do they call it, collateral damage, there's some collateral damage with the fake alien invasion, well, so be it. That's the cost of
that's their mindset,
their way.
No question. It is their mindset, and it's just so disturbing. And it's surprising to me that so many people just don't get it. They hear what they're being told to do, and they just do it, rather than looking at all of the pieces of this puzzle and making better decisions. It's really surprising to me. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it is. So I don't know
sad,
if you're
really,
as surprised as I am, but
so much of this is happening. But the upside is more and more people are starting to wake up and see it for what it is, and see that the news media in this country is propaganda. I think it's funny, the old saying in Russia when they had Pravda during the Soviet eras, and then they chide us with this now. They say, well, you Americans, back in the Russian days of the Soviet Union, we knew Pravda was propaganda, but you Americans, you don't even know you're being propagandized.
That's
now
right.
People are waking up and seeing what fake news really is.
And that's good.
Why alternative shows like yours and my books and this kind of thing is becoming more and more popular, because people are starting to wake up and realize, hey, there's a big picture and we're not getting it. Yeah.
Yeah, people are starting to open their eyes a little bit more, but it needs to happen a lot faster. But this has been a great conversation with you, Brad, about so many of your experiences. And I give you credit. You're pretty courageous, traveling all the way down to Antarctica in a boat. So that's amazing. But next time I do hope you'll take the plane. It sounds a little better than your sailboat in rough seas. Oh, my gosh. But, again, I really appreciate you sharing so much of what you found out and your knowledge about this whole arena. It's really great that you know so much about it all.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on. And you always know it's a great interview when an hour and a half just goes by with a snap of a finger. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk, and we should certainly do it again, because, boy, we didn't even talk about the Battle of High Jump or the Black Goo or so many other things.
I know, we didn't even get to the goo. And do you have another book in the works?
Not currently, just because Beyond Esoteric only just came out this year, and still doing a lot to promote that. People want to find out more about what I'm up to, and you mentioned it in the intro, the Weird Street Faire I produce here in San Francisco, and I publish other authors, and we've just picked up Michael Jaco, the Intuitive Warrior series, and Laura Eisenhower is going to have 3 books coming out through CCC Publishing. So
great.
Alert your listeners to go check that out. All my books and other authors that we publish, including Leo Lion-Zagami and Lon Milo Duquette and several others, are on cccpublishing.com.
Love him.
He's great, isn't he?
Oh, my God, I love him. He and Constance, oh, my God. Yeah.
They're awesome.
Just an incredible talent. We've had Lon on the show so many times, and every time we end up laughing so hard, but learning so much at the same time. All of his books are phenomenal. So, yeah, he's one of the highlights on our show and will always be. But, Brad, thank you again for taking your time to join me tonight and to enlighten our listeners. This has been great, and wish you a happy Thanksgiving.
Well, happy Thanksgiving to you, too, and hopefully your co-pilot gets better. Hoping and wishing her well. Maybe she's listening now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Maybe next time you'll get to meet her. I definitely want to have you back. And next week, everybody, we will have Michelle Claire on. She is a great psychic medium, and don't forget to tune in. And if you'd like a reading, guess what? You can have one. So in the meantime, everybody, have a great Thanksgiving. Eat a lot of wonderful food, especially pies. And until then, I'll see you on the Blue Highway. Good night, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next week for another radio adventure with Supernatural.